Pickleball players are sprouting like crazy, and so are new paddles. It can be pretty intimidating to buy your first paddle, but if you watch this whole video, I'm sure you'll be okay. Hey everybody, it's Luca from Rackets Runners. Now obviously pickleball is a super fun sport, and a lot of different types of players are starting to come to that realization. Whatever age, whatever previous athletic ability, it's super enticing to a lot of us, and at the store we've started noticing a certain theme as to which type of paddle suits which type of beginner. That's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be poking a little bit of fun at each stereotypical beginner, but the overarching goal of this video is to help them ultimately pick a paddle that best suits their game. Now before we go on, as usual, remember that every paddle we talk about here you can check out on our website, racketsandrunners.ca. And please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know down in the comments section what you want me to cover next. And the 6-0 review is coming soon, I promise. Now there are some pretty funny stereotypical beginners in this sport, so if I do get a little bit sarcastic and a little roasty, remember that it's all in good fun. I too was once a stereotype beginner in this sport, but without further ado, let's get into it. This is kind of the most standard beginner, I guess you could say. A few of your friends already play the sport, they've told you how much fun it is, and you've hesitated for a bit because you might not be the most athletic, but you tried it out and had a blast. You want to buy your first paddle and you're willing to invest a bit, but what's going to be the best one for your game? You want to go for a user-friendly, forgiving paddle that's going to help you develop your game rather than punish you when you're not playing perfectly. Something like the Carbon 2 non-power 16mm paddle is perfect for a couple of reasons. For one, it's a standard length paddle, so it's going to be much more maneuverable than something extended, and it's going to have a wider, more forgiving paddle face. I forgot to bring this paddle, by the way, sorry about that. That's why you see it popping up on screen somewhere over here, kind of like an owl perched on my left shoulder. With that thick 16mm core, it's also pretty soft, which can be super important if you're just getting into pickleball because it's going to force you to develop a soft game, which is such an important part of the game if you do want to improve. Especially in doubles, the soft game is where there's the biggest skill gap, and soft paddles just make that side of the sport a little bit easier. The fact that the Carbon 2 also has a carbon top sheet is great because when you do eventually learn the proper technique to add spin to your shot, the paddle definitely won't hold you back. It may not be the most spin friendly out there, but it's at least above average, so that's great. Okay, we've all seen this player. You're the type of player who goes out to the court and starts playing like your prime Roger Federer on a mini tennis court. You take massive swings at the ball. It might not be the right way to play pickleball, but believe me, I understand the impulse. Anyways, you don't actually want to forget all those skills you've developed as a tennis player. A lot of the best players in pickleball come from a tennis background, so there actually is a place for powerful, spinny ground strokes in this game. Go for an extended and super responsive paddle like the bread and butter filth here. It'll give you the best access to spin and complement that style you've developed over all these years playing tennis. The extended paddle in particular is extremely important because the swing pattern is going to be the closest one to a tennis racket, so you'll feel right at home. Shorter paddles are just going to feel weird, believe me, I've been there. Here's the thing though, pickleball definitely isn't all about rallying from the baseline. There's a lot more net play and a lot more touch than in tennis, and you absolutely need to develop that part of your game if you want to be competitive in the sport. Super thin paddles may initially seem great because they feel closest to a tennis racket, but you're never going to want to dink or hit a touch shot with them because they're not good at that, and neither are you. Go for something thicker. Again, the bread and butter filth is perfect because it's 16mm. It still has fantastic spin and connection to the ball, but it's not going to let you down completely in the soft game because it is a little bit thicker. Now believe me, I made the mistake of going for the thinnest and most responsive paddle when I first started playing pickleball, and it took me years to develop any skill in the soft game. Don't make that same mistake. Okay, now I'm not going to pretend like I understand what a badminton player feels like when they get on a pickleball court because my experience with badminton goes about as far as an annual gym class growing up. That said, I've helped a lot of badminton players pick a pickleball paddle before, so I kind of understand which one they generally tend to go for. Tennis players like extended paddles, badminton players like shorter paddles. The main reason for that is because shorter paddles have a lower pivot point, so they're much more flickable, if that makes sense. That's a motion that's not so common in tennis, but much more common in badminton. I've seen some former badminton players hit some crazy, insane flicky shots where they just snap that wrist and the ball goes exactly where they're aiming it. Kind of like tennis players, badminton players should also go for something that's super responsive. So a shorter length thermoform paddle like the Carbon 2X Power 60mm could be pretty much perfect. You also want to go for something light. Now, standard length paddles do feel relatively lighter than extended paddles, but the lighter the better here because that'll feel most like your super lightweight badminton racket. Pickleball started as a sport that was dominated by the older age group, and while the average age definitely has gone down over the last several years, we gotta show some love to you older newcomers out there. You've been crucial in driving this sport forward and getting it to where it is today in terms of accessibility and popularity, and for that we're extremely grateful. So let's say you're over 60 and you've lost a bit of your athleticism over the years, you don't want to go for any crazy heavy extended paddle. They're great for certain players, don't get me wrong, but they are tough to swing and you definitely don't need them to compete. You want to go for a paddle that's going to complement your strengths. You might not be able to compete with younger players in the power and spin game, but where you definitely can outfox them is in the cat and mouse touch and control part of pickleball. Go for something light, forgiving, short, and especially a soft paddle. Something like the Selkirk Vanguard 2.0 Epic Lightweight, what a name by the way, but anyways, it's kind of the perfect paddle. The Vanguard 2.0 line has probably the best touch in pickleball right now, so it'll perfectly complement that style. Shorter, lighter paddles are also more maneuverable, and that's great because they'll just help you react a little bit quicker when points accelerate around the net. Now, quick little anecdote here before we move on, but when I first started playing pickleball, I had that hotshot tennis player attitude where I thought I was going to absolutely destroy anyone I came up against, but I pretty quickly got humbled by some older players who had a total mastery of the soft game, and that kind of brought me back down to earth, realized, yeah, I wasn't all that in this sport yet. Speaking of hotshots, the last type of player we're going to talk about is the I'm too cool for pickleball player who's like, yeah, I guess I'll give it a go. We all know a player like that. They go onto the court for the first time thinking they're the coolest person ever, too good for pickleball. They play their first game and let's be honest, they kind of get humiliated. I'm not going to say I'm happy when I see that, but I do feel a certain level of satisfaction because pickleball does tend to get a little bit of disrespect, so seeing people realize how difficult it is always a little bit fun. But anyways, this player usually comes back to pickleball and they absolutely love it. Obviously the humiliation hurt, but it made them want to improve, and they usually had that attitude because they come from some sort of athletic background. If that's the type of player you are, go for something extended with more standard playability. Something like the Selkirk Amped Invicta Midweight is perfect because it will give you great all-around playability without any emphasis on one specific part of the game. It's kind of like a blank canvas that's going to allow you to explore different styles and eventually settle on one. Maybe in the future you can go for a paddle with more specific playability, but for now this is perfect. Of course you could go for something more expensive, but it's better to start off in a slightly lower price bracket. I know this isn't exactly cheap, but it's an easier pill to swallow and you'll be more likely to actually start playing the sport if you don't have to spend $300 to get into it. So there you go. Those are some of the best paddles for every stereotypical type of pickleball beginner. Let me know if there's another type of newbie that I missed out on, but I think I kind of nailed it with that list. Obviously there were some facetious comments made and I'm sorry if I offended anyone, but just know it's all love. The more people playing pickleball, the better it is in our eyes. With that though, that is going to be the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Remember that if you do want to demo any of the paddles we mentioned here, you can come visit us in store or you can check them out online at racketsandrunners.ca.